Emily showed up early at her mother-in-law Barbara's place in a quiet suburb of upstate New York. She knew Barbara would, as usual when they're alone, relentlessly nag her about not having kids. But the woman also remembered that today was her mother-in-law's birthday, so she needed to suck it up to keep everything smooth. After all, the birthday gal wanted to celebrate at her cozy lakeside cabin just outside Rochester, in a tight family circle, inviting just 2 friends. Emily's gut didn't steer her wrong. The second she stepped into the small but pretty comfy cabin, her mother-in-law started griping about her life. And most of all, as she swore, she longed to dote on grandkids, but there were still none. "You and Greg are both well past 30. Married for 13 years, no son, no daughter. How's that even okay?" The hostess fumed. "I know your maternity leave might cause money troubles. So what? Everyone goes through that. And Greg's doing well. He's got his business. You'll get by for a while without your cash. Your waitress salary isn't all that big anyway. And don't write me off. What? I won't help you? If you want, you can even go back to work early. I'll sit with the little one." Emily tried not to argue or explain anything. She just helped set up a solid spread for the guests' arrival. Ordering dishes from a restaurant or buying pre-made stuff was a no-go for Barbara. In her words, restaurant food lacked the main thing soul. "I know what you're gonna say." She brushed off her daughter. In-laws protests. "Restaurant chefs are pros. All that jazz. So what? Right now we're making salads together, practically chatting with them, passing on our kindness. Does that happen at your restaurant, number? And pre-made stuff? You don't even know what it's made of. So don't argue. Better yet, tell me this." And Barbara pressed for an answer. Why did Emily show up at the lakeside community on a public bus from Rochester instead of in a car with her husband? That Greg had to work today because his business demanded it didn't register with his mom. "Nope, everything's off with you two," she grumbled. "Other couples always go to events together, but you guys? Always apart. That's why things go sideways. You've been living together so long and still no kids." Half listening to her mother-in-law, Emily thought she was kinda right. Her husband really could have put off work today. It's his mom's milestone birthday, after all. And he didn't even get a gift worthy of the occasion. He bought some meaningless trinket. "Good thing I got what Barbara really needs and dreams of," the young woman thought with a smile. "What's with that grin?" her mother-in-law said, surprised and ticked off. "I'm pouring my heart out here, saying I can't go on without grandkids, and you're amused." "I'm not laughing," Emily assured her. "I'm just watching you work the table. It's not just done, it's done right. And pretty, too. That's why I smiled." "Huh," Barbara said, surprised. "I never thought about beauty at the kitchen table. So, sometimes bickering, sometimes just chatting about random nonsense, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law got the festive table ready without rushing. Since Barbara preferred to live at the cabin near Lake Ontario in the summer, only heading to her Rochester apartment when absolutely necessary, she had no issues. She had all the dishes and supplies she needed. An old fridge, hauled out here years ago, still did its job just fine. No trouble with the gas stove either, and everything else was, as they say, right at hand. By the set time, guests started showing up. First was Donna, one of the birthday gal's friendsa, pretty cheerful woman, whose friendship with Barbara went back to their youth. Then came Grace. Both friends were driven to the cabin by their sons from nearby towns. Barbara offered both guys to come in, rest, and grab something tasty, but both young men politely declined, citing other commitments. Last was Greg. Handing his mom a gift and congratulating her, he sat at the table without waiting for an invite and started yapping about contracts and other business stuff, like he didn't get that neither his mom nor her friends cared about business. As for his wife, though she'd picked up some business know-how thanks to her husband's years of effort, she didn't give his talk much, Wait just nodded along. A bit later, when the birthday gal and guests were settled at the table, Barbara and Emily managed to stop Greg's non-stop chatter, redirecting his attention to the birthday and the dishes on the table. The guests especially loved one of the salads with a fancy name, a recipe Barbara found online. She'd made it for the first time and worried it might not be great, so she prepared a smaller batch. But now, seeing how fast it was disappearing, she decided to play it safe to avoid an awkward moment. "Emily, sweetie, go to the basement and grab some stuff," she said, naming the needed ingredients. "You remember the ratios, right? We need more of that salad. See how much everyone loves it?" "Tell us the recipe while you're at it," Donna asked. "I'm making it for my Pete tomorrow." The basement was lit by a weak bulb. Looking around, Emily saw two small sacks by the far wall. Assuming they might hold the veggies she needed, she first checked some narrow bins along the side walls, just in case, then headed to the sacks. One felt like it had something small and hard inside. Potatoes, probably, she guessed, and opened the other sack. To Emily's surprise, instead of carrots, cabbage, or anything like that, she found some stuff. Thinking what she needed might be at the bottom, she pulled out a set of women's clothing. Not looking at it closely, assuming the veggies were lower, she reached in again. Her fingers hit something long and stretchy. Trying to figure out what it was, she shook everything out at her feet. Not understanding what these finds could mean, she stared at the women's slippers and pretty decent sneakers in front of her. Weird, she thought. Why would Barbara hide all this down here? Slippers, okay, but I've never seen her in sneakers like these. The clothes weren't her mother in, Law's either. For real, Greg's mom's wardrobe didn't have jeans or t-shirts like these. Plus, the stuff didn't match Barbara's size. She'd never fit in them, Emily thought, eyeing a t-shirt. And women her age don't wear this stuff anyway. You'd only see young girls in t-shirts like these. This is all so strange. Asterisk. Carefully sitting on the second sack, which later turned out to hold the veggies she needed, Emily wondered how all this ended up in the basement, and in a sack no less. Where could her mother-in-law even get this stuff? Maybe she found it somewhere? She tried to guess. But then why bring it to the basement? After mulling over a few possibilities for the strange sack, Emily concluded Barbara had nothing to do with it. So that meant Greg was behind the t-shirts, jeans, and all. But why would he? Then it hit her. What if these are his mistress's things? Maybe he was meeting her here, then hid everything in the basement to cover it up. That option, pretty damn painful, felt the most believable to her. After all, there were times when her husband was gone for a day or two, explaining it with urgent business trips. Couldn't he, knowing his mom wouldn't leave Rochester those days, have been spending time with a mistress at the cabin? But why drag the stuff to the basement? She asked herself. Though he had to hide it somewhere so his mom wouldn't find it. Coming to that conclusion, Emily decided not to show she suspected her husband of cheating. Tossing everything she found back into the sack, she opened the second one, found what she needed, and headed to the stairs. When Emily, after quickly chopping the veggies, entered the room with the festive table, her mother-in-law was lively chatting with her friends, while Greg, off by the window, was talking to someone on the phone. Listening in, she realized her husband was giving someone business advice, but if she'd gotten closer, she'd have heard he was talking to a woman, and this woman, taking her husband's advice the way he wanted, wasn't shy about it. She'd throw in sweet nicknames or suddenly start getting mad about something. Greg was talking to Sarah, the same gal Emily had seen a couple times, who, according to him, represented a partner's interests. Back then, Emily didn't have the slightest suspicion anything was off. After all, this Sarah acted casual, chatting with Greg like office women do with male colleagues in downtown Rochester. Her husband had been living a double life for over 2 years. He played it careful, so Emily never suspected a thing. The cabin by Lake Ontario became the lovers' meeting spot. To avoid issues in winter, Greg set up heating in the cabin with electric heaters. When he wasn't there, the devices kept the temperature just above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but they warmed the place up fast. Sarah brought some of her stuff to the cabin back in spring. Business clothes weren't exactly romantic, after all. Sadly, with warmer weather, the lovers hit a snag. They couldn't stay at the cabin for days like in winter. Barbara was born in a small town outside Buffalo. Sure, she'd lived in Rochester forever, having moved there right after high school for college and only visiting her parents on break. But city life never made her forget her rural roots. So, after buying the cabin near Lake Ontario, she kept fixing it up, trying to make it cozier. "One day I'll move here for good," she'd say, smiling but with a hint of longing. "This is real life, clean air, freedom. So what if it snows in winter? Big deal, I haven't forgotten how to shovel, and the town roads always get plowed." Usually Greg knew ahead of time when his mom was heading to the cabin. He'd neatly pack Sarah's clothes in an old suitcase and stash it in the attic. But recently, his mom didn't call or say she was coming to the cabin that evening to spend a few days. Barbara called him when the public bus from Rochester was already nearing the lakeside town. She asked him to swing by her apartment in the city and bring a big bag from the hallway the next morning. "Just don't forget to grab 4 jars from the fridge," she told her son. "I didn't take them myself, so nothing spoils. Keep them in your fridge till morning if you're not coming today." Sarah changed on the fly. To save time, Greg just tossed her clothes and shoes into a white sack and hauled it to the basement. After that, the lovers hopped in the car and headed to a bus stop on the other side of town, just a few minutes' walk away. The birthday celebration dragged on. Barbara's friends' sons came to pick them up from nearby suburbs when the sun was dipping toward the horizon. "Why don't you two stay?" Barbara suggested to her daughter-in-law and son. "There's enough space. The couch in the second room folds out, so it's a real double bed. Stay, guys." Emily was fine with it, but one glance at her husband, and she knew that wasn't his vibe. According to Greg, being out of the office today could mess up a new contract. Barbara started coaxing her son. Emily stayed quiet. Her suspicion about a mistress reared up again. Those women's clothes and shoes in the basement weren't there for no reason. After some persuading, Greg finally agreed. Plus, after another phone call, which he said was with a colleague, he seemed to calm down. But then another call came. "Pointless," Greg spat, pissed. "I gotta go. They just remembered a quarterly audit, and we're still a mess. I'll be at the office in Rochester all night, or it's gonna be bad if we don't pull it off." Seeing her changed husband, Emily figured his business was really in rough shape. It could well be about some serious audit. It didn't hit her that, like the last call, Greg was talking to his mistress, who, to snag him that night, said she was pregnant. Since the guy had been drinking at the party, he couldn't drive. The called taxi took about half an hour to show. The whole time, Greg stood outside, smoking one cigarette after another. The businessman's mood was crap. Sarah, going on about her pregnancy, demanded solid, decisive action. She swore it couldn't go on like this, and she wasn't doing a damn thing to fix the problem. Finally, he took off. Emily stayed at the cabin with her mother-in-law. Together, they cleared the table and washed dishes. The talk was about nothing much. Barbara said she really loved today's feast, and it was great that her son and daughter-in-law agreed to stay the night, but it sucked that Greg had to leave. What if, Emily thought, deciding it'd be best to straight up ask her mother-in-law about the women's stuff right now. "What stuff?" Barbara said, confused. "I didn't haul anything in a sack down there. Go grab it, let's see what it is." Checking the contents, her mother-in-law just shrugged, baffled. She couldn't even guess where it came from, especially in her cabin, and in the basement she'd spring-cleaned no less. The only reason, she said, could be that Greg, helping his mom with something, saw the sack in the yard. Where'd it come from? Probably someone didn't want to lug it to the dumpsters by the lake and tossed it over the fence, and Greg might have thought his mom forgot to bring it in from the car. Assuming it was something not too important, he could have gone to the basement and left it there. "Take it to the dumpster," Barbara said, solving the issue. "Go, please, it's not far." Tossing the clothes and shoes into the sack, Barbara headed to the second room to make the bed for her daughter-in-law. As Emily picked up the sack from the floor, she spotted a business card. Thinking it might have fallen from her husband's pocket, she grabbed it, and to her surprise, the number was unfamiliar. Not only that, instead of Greg's name, it had a woman's name and surname. What if this stuff was stolen? Emily thought. It's practically Newsome woman paid for it. Probably better not to toss it and call instead. The card, like the stuff in the sack, belonged to Sarah. No, she wasn't some big-deal office worker or tied to business. Sarah's work was at a beauty salon in Rochester, where her colleagues and clients hailed her as the best hairstylist. Sarah, as sometimes happens, had regular clients who trusted their hair to her alone. For those who'd seen her skills and wanted to keep using her, Sarah made business cards. She kept a few in the back pocket of jeans she wore at the cabin. One slipped out when Emily and her mother-in-law were checking the clothes. Why not? Emily thought, grabbing her phone. It was evening, but not too late. I'll call. No one got why Sarah, answering the call, hit video mode. But a few seconds later, Emily saw her husband next to his mistress in all his glory, as they say. While a rattled Sarah, kinda thrown, asked who was calling, Emily, silently in a daze, stared at Greg, not in a computer chair but in bed. Finally, the young woman snapped out of it. She ended the call. Tears welled up, but Emily managed to choke back the urge to sob. Something happened? Her mother-in-law asked, concerned, coming back to the room where the festive table had been. Something wrong? Nah, all good, Emily assured her. Just remembered there's a big table order at the cafe in Rochester in a couple days. Got me thinking, it's going to be tough working that night. I hate those cafe events. Customers can be so damn picky sometimes. Seeing her mother-in-law walk in, Emily decided right then. She wasn't saying a word. It wasn't just Barbara's birthday, it was a milestone. Why ruin the festive mood? Plus, according to her mother-in-law, her cousin and husband were coming tomorrow morning from Syracuse. They lived in another city, hoped to drive, but their car was still in the shop, and the train from their town only ran on odd days. So the sister couldn't make the birthday. Meanwhile, at Sarah's apartment in downtown Rochester, things got real heated. At first, Greg didn't get what went down. He just stared blankly at his mistress, who was gripping her smartphone and looking at him just as cluelessly. Finally, snatching the phone from her hand, he checked the number of the unexpected call. "You lost your mind?" he whispered, pale. "Why'd you answer? Why turn on video? Didn't you see who it was? How would I know your still wife's number?" Sarah went on the attack. "And where'd she get mine? I hit video by accident happens. You really don't get what just happened?" Greg raised his voice. "You know what's coming now? What'd you want?" Sarah's voice dripped with anger. "Sooner or later, this had to end. I'm pregnant with your kid, and I'm not getting rid of it. You lived with her over 10 years and no kids. What's that mean?" "What?" Greg asked, feeling his anger boil. "It means something's wrong with your Emily. She's never gotten pregnant." Sarah pressed, trying to crush him, to make him do what she needed. "She's crazy, defective. You just need to divorce her, fast. She saw you on my phone, she knows everything. You're done with her. With me, it'll work out. Or maybe you set this whole thing up," Greg threw out. "And that pregnancy? We'll check on that." "What? Think about it," Sarah said venomously. "Did I give her my number? Tell her when to call? As for the pregnancy, you got a choice. Pay child support, or we're going to City Hall. You in your right mind." Greg tried to push back. "I am. Not sure about you," Sarah kept attacking. "Your business won't take a hit, and you'll up your status with me. Think about it. Either everyone knows your wife's a waitress at some second-rate cafe in Rochester, or she's a master stylist at the city's top salon, plus gives you a kid. What's better?" No clue how long the lovers' fight went on that evening. As for Emily, she couldn't sleep till the middle of the night. Lying in bed, staring at the dark window, the woman recalled years of married life, realizing that now, this evening, in those seconds when she saw her husband in bed with his mistress, everything changed. Now she'd have a whole new life, and she had to start it right away. No time to prep. In the morning, she sent Greg a text, letting him know about the divorce. Politely apologizing to Barbara for the rush, Emily reminded her she had to get to work that morning in Rochester. Sadly, she missed the first bus. The second wasn't due for 2 hours, so she'd definitely be late. So it was better not to wait, but to hurry and maybe catch the local train from the nearby station. To get to the train platform, she had to walk along a high embankment by the tracks outside town. When she was a couple 100 meters from the station, Emily saw a little boy crouched by the outer rails, trying to set something on them. Knowing a kid might panic seeing an approaching train and not make it to a safe distance, she veered off the path, pushed through tall grass, and climbed the embankment. Approaching the boy, Emily saw he was trying to place a coin on the rails. Probably wanted to see what happened if a train ran over it. While she was getting to the embankment and climbing up, a train appeared around the bend. Though it was close to the station, it was moving pretty fast. Caught up in his task, the kid didn't see or hear the approaching train. He only snapped out of it when someone's arms grabbed him and yanked him from the tracks. Seconds later, the cars thundered past. "What's with that?" Emily asked, trying to calm the crying boy, holding him close. "A big kid like you forgot trains move super fast on rails? It's real dangerous there. Please, don't cry. You won't, right? Promise? Good job. Where do you live? Let me take you to your mom and dad." "No, I won't tell them what almost happened. I'll say there was no train." Emily knew taking the kid home would make her late for work, meaning trouble. But she couldn't do anything else. On the way, the boy shared that he lived just with his dad in a small house near the lake. Though he was small, he had big responsibilities. The kid's name was Tim. He went to the store alone, bought groceries, and his dad left the house way less. It was hard for him to get around. The thing was, he'd recently lost his sight. His name was Mark. He worked as a park ranger in the Finger Lakes region and didn't cut poachers any slack. People even respected him for his fairness. But some jerks, ambushing him one day, landed such a blow to his head that he ended up in the hospital. Treatment only helped so much. The blow caused complications, and the boy's dad lost his sight. "They say it can be fixed. Seriously, grown-up style," Tim said. "But that surgery costs money." The kid's dad, hearing he came back with some woman, knew Tim had nearly gotten into a bad spot. Thanking Emily for her help, the man promised he wouldn't scold his son. "Why would I?" Mark smiled faintly. "At that age, all boys try to climb somewhere. Good thing you saw and figured out what was up." Saying bye to Mark, Emily headed to the station in the nearby town. But though she hustled, she still missed the train. The last option was a taxi. Sure, that ride could get pricey, but she had no choice. The young guy pulled up in less than 15 minutes. Probably, despite his age, the driver already read people well, knew what they needed. Barely glancing at his passenger, he assured her he'd try to get there fast. "Though, in 2 spots the speed's capped at 30 because of repairs," he said. "But there's no repair work yet. Just cameras set up, so you can't speed." Emily got to work at her cafe in Rochester just a few minutes late, but that was enough for the manager to chew her out again. For some reason, he'd been picking on the waitress for a while. Something was always wrong to him. A month and a half ago, he suddenly said Emily had gained weight, and it was hurting the cafe's vibe. To calm the boss down, the woman even went on a diet, but the nitpicking didn't stop. Faking a smile, Emily served the sparse customers. Taking stock of recent events, she grimly concluded troubles were piling on her like a horn of plenty. Though, she noted to herself, that last bit didn't fit, since a horn of plenty, in her mind, meant something good. For real, yesterday she found out her husband, who she'd always trusted and thought was the most reliable and best guy, betrayed her. The second rotten story was being late for work today. She wanted to explain why, but figured the manager wouldn't get it. He wouldn't have run to save a kid from a train, she thought. Not that kind of guy. Closer to evening, the cafe, as always, got busier. A swanky hotel nearby in downtown Rochester drew business types, some execs from Buffalo or Syracuse, and foreigners often showed up too, coming to the city for their own special deals. It was like that today. Though Emily was wiped out by evening, the manager didn't care and told her to serve a table where foreign guests were seated. Usually, evenings like that went to a waitress who started later, not morning shift. But a few days ago, one of the girls quit. Emily guessed it was Olivia just because of the manager, who picked on her every damn day. Since they hadn't found a replacement, the remaining waitresses had to handle extra work. Sure, they were told it'd show in their pay, but that news didn't make it easier. That evening, Emily had to serve the foreigners' table. Though there was a local with them too, maybe from Rochester or a nearby suburb. Passing by and heading to a table where a young guy and gal had just sat, she noticed one of the foreigners, Harry, turn to the person sitting left of him, listening closely. Meanwhile, that person, quickly pulling a small vial from his pocket and unscrewing the cap, reached it toward his neighbor's plate. Is he about to poison him? Emily thought, horrified. Getting a bit closer to the table, the waitress accidentally bumped the hand with the vial. Not expecting it, the man dropped it. The vial hit the floor, and a soft sound of breaking glass followed. "What's that mean?" the guest snapped. "How are you acting?" The foreigner spoke decent English, though his accent muddled how it came off. His table mates, kinda thrown by what happened, also demanded answers. The manager appeared out of nowhere, calming the customers, swearing it was an accident, and called the cleaning gal. "What are you doing? Throwing yourself at people?" he hissed at her, half voice, pissed and annoyed. "Gone nuts? I'll cut your bonus so you remember how not to act." Emily tried to explain her move by the guy's vial stunt, but the manager wouldn't hear a word. As for the foreigners, they refused to engage, paid the bill, and left the cafe. When everyone in the room calmed down a bit, the manager told Emily to go to the back room. There, he started chewing her out again, not holding back, for what she did. Emily decided it was better not to argue or prove anything, so he'd cool off faster, since that's how it always went with him. And it worked. Promising she'd be fired for the next big screw-up, the manager headed back to the floor. Her shift finally wrapped. She didn't want to go home to their Rochester apartment, since she'd run into Greg, who'd cheated on her, and that meant an ugly talk. But, as Emily decided, she'd had enough trials for today. Saying bye to her coworkers, she left the cafe and suddenly realized she needed to act decisively now. She wouldn't get into a fight, wouldn't make a sinesh, wasn't the one at fault. If Greg tried to justify himself, she wouldn't buy his words. She could just say he looked stellar in his mistress's bed, and she'd say it dead serious. Emily started walking toward their downtown apartment, but didn't make it 5 steps before a guy by the entrance asked her to stop. It was the same foreigner whose plate the guy next to him tried to slip something into. The businessman spoke good English. He thanked her and said he hadn't guessed Rochester could have dangerous people, and it was weird to him that folks like that came here from abroad, too. "I don't even know what was in that little bottle," the man said. "I'll admit it could have been some kind of poison, but I hope not." Listening, Emily assured him she hoped so too. And in her view, the manager shouldn't have let it slide. The vial's contents, spilled on the floor, could have been collected by police, and analysis probably wouldn't have been tough. Harry agreed, but since it was all in the past now, he thought it was better not to revisit it, especially since it ended okay. "You heading home?" he asked. "Let me drive you." She tried to say no, but then decided to take the offer. Nothing bad would happen. Plus, if her husband saw her getting out of the car, it might hit him, even a fraction of what she went through. Emily really wanted Greg to feel at least 1,000th of what she did. Her husband was out on the balcony of their apartment. He did see her step out of a foreign car parked almost right by the building. Though he was on the 6th floor, he still caught the smile on her face. But of course, he couldn't hear her word, so he had to settle for his imagination. The second Emily walked into the apartment, Greg, red with rage, threw a pretty sincere jealous fit. But he didn't get a reaction. She patiently stayed quiet, and finally, when her husband ran out of steam, she calmly reminded him of yesterday's event. "My smartphone doesn't just show video during calls, it saves it," she lied. "So I've got yesterday's episode. I think the divorce won't be a hassle. Oh, and I almost forgot." Emily smiled. "I haven't shown your mom yet. Maybe I should. What do you think?" "You're something else," was all Greg could say. Pacing a few times from corner to corner, the man stopped at the wardrobe. Tossing a few shirts and something else into a bag, he headed for the door. "You want to leave your stuff in your mom's basement too?" she blurted, not even sure why. "Next to the sack with your mistress's sneakers, jeans, and undies. Her name's Sarah, right?" Instead of a reply, Emily just heard the sound of the front door closing. Left alone, to her own surprise, she calmed down and suddenly realized not everything in her life was so bad. A divorce? So what? Plenty of women go through it, and nothing awful happens. The next day, Emily saw the foreigner she'd talked to yesterday at the cafe again. This time, Harry, as the businessman introduced himself, was alone. He came to the cafe an hour before her shift ended, and then, like yesterday, offered to drive her home. This time, they had a real interesting talk. The man shared that his business was tied to clinics, existing ones and new ones opening abroad. And in Rochester, he wanted to start a clinic too. At first one, later another. His main task now was getting land allocated for construction in the city. At home, Emily found her husband. Greg, like yesterday, was on the balcony, watching a car stop and his wife step out. He knew that car belonged to a foreigner. And the worst part for him was that this Harrier Hank, as locals called him, was serious competition. Buddies told him city officials were more likely to give the land in Rochester's suburbs to a clinic than for some vague goals Greg listed. But really, his goal was simple. Greg had info that, max 2 years from now, a construction company planned to build a few 17-story condos on that land. That's when Greg and 2 other businessmen could make good money flipping that plot and others. Talking Harry out of it wasn't working. Pushing him out some other way was too tough. Only one way out: get rid of Hank. But that wasn't so simple. The foreigner was real careful. But then came Nick, another foreign businessman who'd long held a grudge against Harry. Greg's partner met with Nick. No clue what they talked about, but it led to the cafe incident, where this foreign businessman, also trying to set up in Rochester and who Harry trusted, tried slipping the lucky businessman a drug that'd, at best, knock him out for a while. Emily, obviously, didn't know any of this, but Greg, seeing her with Harry, was out of his mind. He even managed to forget his fling with Sarah and that his wife caught him in the act. She tried reminding him of his cheating and that a divorce was coming, but it didn't faze Greg. He accused her of every damn sin, recalling times when, at a restaurant or on vacation with him, she'd chatted too eagerly with some guy. Eventually, Emily got sick of the drama, and trying not to listen to her husband, started packing stuff she might need soon. "Where you coming from?" Greg asked, suspicious. "This Hank guy?" "Sadly, no," she replied, not turning. "I can't stand your stupidity anymore. Plus, it's gross. Every time I think of that video call, you in bed with your mistress, I want to puke. So I'm going to a friend's. Remember Nadia? She's alone right now. Her husband's on a work trip, and the kids are with their grandparents in Buffalo for the summer." After his wife left, Greg stood in the room a bit, then hit the balcony. He started suspecting Emily wasn't really going to Nadia's but to that damn foreigner screwing up his big deal. Looking down at his wife, leaving the building and heading toward the alley between houses, he cursed Harry and Emily with every word he had. Probably, as Greg decided right then, his wife messed up his deal the most. At least, that's what Nick said, the guy who was supposed to slip Harry the poison. Slowly, Greg's thoughts shifted to cheerier stuff. It finally hit him that tonight, He could hit up Sarah or call her over to his Rochester apartment. No risk. A one-bedroom in a building that used to be a family dorm back in the day was way worse than a normal apartment, and no one would stare at Sarah like yesterday. Some gal practically drilled him with her eyes when he walked down the second-floor hallway of her complex. Sarah was like she'd been waiting for his call and agreed to spend the night at his place. No convincing needed, but asked him to pick her up from her salon downtown. Over the next few days, Harry waited for Emily by the cafe doors in Rochester every evening, and on weekends, they hit up various art galleries in the city. Truth be told, Emily didn't get paintings much, but the foreigner knew his art and played tour guide. They also hit Rochester's swankiest restaurant, a place Emily once dreamed of working at. That his wife was spending every evening with the hated foreign businessman eventually got back to Greg. By then, he'd chilled out about the divorce. Plus, he had to think about Sarah's pregnancy, guessing no tricks would save him, and that splitting assets meant dividing their downtown apartment. Tallying losses, Greg looked at options for new housing in Rochester to bring his mistress to. And he didn't forget about the damn foreigner who wasn't just tanking his deal but stealing his wife from under his nose. Despite the divorce being a done deal, deep down, Greg hoped things would fall back into place. Emily might rethink the divorce, and Sarah might back off or get an abortion. Or hell, maybe she lied about the pregnancy. But why? To tie him down? Weighing it all, Greg decided the main obstacle in his life was this foreigner. Get rid of him, and the deal's clear. And maybe Emily, forgiving him for this now annoying Sarah, would come back and not bring up that cursed call. Sadly, taking out Harry hit snags. Nick bailed after the cafe mess and refused to do anything. Plus, the successful foreign businessman kept his distance from him. Only one option left. Greg had a buddy, Mike, who used to dabble in extortion in Buffalo. Sure, his price was sky high, but it looked like there was no other way. So, one evening, after another Rochester stroll, Harry, who was seriously into Emily, walked her to the door of her friend's building in the city, and as soon as it closed behind her, he headed down his usual route when 3 shadows peeled off from parked cars. Mike, Greg's thug buddy, planned to do it quiet, no guns. But he miscalculated big time. The foreigner wasn't just tough, he owned self-defense moves. In less than half a minute, all 3 were on the pavement. "Better call an ambulance," Harry told Mike, who was struggling and groaning to get up. "Your pals probably got concussions and one's got a broken arm, looks like." For some weird reason, Harry decided Emily was behind the attack. Thinking back on past events and her obvious interest in him, the businessman somehow figured she'd set it up with the thugs. Pocket cash, in his mind, she'd give to the attackers, keeping all 3 of his bank cards for herself, whose pins he realized she'd learned by spying on his moves. The next day after the attack, Emily called him as usual, but the businessman said their thing was done and asked her not to bother him anymore. Saying Emily was super bummed would be an understatement. Harry really grew on her, but she wasn't after his money. Luckily, Greg's mom helped take her mind off it. She still spent most of her time at the cabin by Lake Ontario, and now invited her daughter-in-law to stay a bit. "You're supposed to go on vacation, right?" her mother-in-law reminded her. "Come rest." Barbara didn't know about the upcoming divorce. She was a good woman, as Emily had long realized, and she didn't want to upset her early. Emily arrived at the lakeside cabin the next morning. She was indeed starting vacation the next week, so she took up the invite. Tomorrow or the day after, I can gently tell her what happened, she thought. Barbara should get it. What next? Emily tried not to think about that. After chatting with her mother-in-law, Emily headed to a small grocery store in the nearby town for supplies, and on the way out, she ran into that same kid Tim she'd saved on the railway tracks. She waited while he grabbed what he needed, then they went to see his dad at their home near the lake. Meanwhile, Harry, using his own sources, finally figured out who jumped him and who ordered it, then filed a police report with the Rochester PD. The next day, Greg was arrested. The attackers were nabbed too. Nick was also taken into custody. "No, we don't need to meet," Emily told Harry, turning down his offer. "It was fun with you, but it's not love. Sorry if I accidentally gave you some hope I didn't mean to." "Then who?" She paused for a few seconds. "There's someone I'd like to tie my life to, but sadly he's in a bad spot. I'm trying to help, but not much is working out." Emily told the foreigner about the boy Tim and his dad Mark. The businessman listened without interrupting, only clarifying a few things. The ex-Ranger's situation genuinely worried Harry, and it seemed to him that Emily, who he'd courted and once suspected of setting up the attack on him, wasn't indifferent to Mark, who was in trouble. "How do I find you in this lakeside town?" Harry asked. "I'd like to help this guy." "Just call me when you're heading out," she replied. "I know how long the trip takes from Rochester, so I'll wait for you in the town center by the bus stop." Harry rolled into the town that same day. He picked up Emily, and they went to the ex-Ranger's house near the lake. There, after talking with Mark about something, he asked her to help with packing. "Where are you taking him?" Emily asked. "To a clinic in Rochester that does these surgeries," the foreigner explained. "I offered Mark to go to my country, do the surgery there, but he's not up for it. Plus, he doesn't have a passport. And getting one takes time. So tell me, please, why are you doing this?" Emily asked, trying not to meet his eyes. "Why?" Harry smiled faintly. "I see how you feel about him. And I know you've got a divorce coming with your husband, who's under arrest now. I feel for him, sure, but I'm not to blame. I didn't order or plan the attack. I know, and the divorce isn't about the attack. He just cheated on me. And it happened practically in front of me," Emily said. And she told the foreigner about the video call. "My now, you could say, ex, got real unlucky," Emily went on. "In one of our last talks, he bragged his mistress was pregnant by him, adding that I couldn't manage that in all these years. A few days later, it came out Sarah was just stringing him along. No pregnancy talk at all. She just wanted his money. She figured after he divorced me, Greg would marry her right away, and she'd live carefree in a big modern apartment in Rochester, cruising in a fancy car, chilling at the best resorts." "Yeah, we get gals like that too," the businessman smirked. "All right, now we're off to the clinic in Rochester where Mark'll get his surgery." "What? Yeah, I'm paying for it all." "Why?" "I really want things to work out for you two, and it's not just that you saved my life at the cafe. I've just never met women like you. Sadly, though, there's no mutual feelings." Harry paused, then added, "And I hope you'll take care of the boy." "Yeah, I'll take him in," Emily said. "I'm still living in that 3-bedroom in Rochester for now. The asset split's not done. Greg signed some document, and now his mom's handling his interests. Barbara still hopes everything will go back to normal and that me and her son, when he's done serving his time, will be together again. Honest to God, I feel so bad for her." Since then, a month passed. The ex-Ranger got the surgery at Strong Memorial Hospital in Rochester. His sight came back. Greg was sent to a prison in Attica for 4 years. Their assets were split. Despite Barbara's protests, the big apartment in downtown Rochester was sold too, like her son's real prestigious SUV. Emily explained her call to sell the place by saying keeping such a big space took a lot of money, and she just couldn't afford that luxury. Her ex-mother-in-law called every day, trying to convince Emily to wait for Greg, saying it wasn't too late to have a kid, and then she could finally dote on the long-awaited grandkid. "Let me come by tomorrow and we'll talk," Emily offered her ex-mother-in-law. They sat on the small cabin's porch by Lake Ontario, and the ex-daughter-in-law spilled, while the ex-mother-in-law listened without cutting in. "Remember how I found that sack with women's clothes in the basement? There was a business card, too." The woman shared all the details, and Barbara listened. Only once did she ask, "So you really kept that video? If you did, please delete it." "Nah, I just said that so he'd stop weaseling and find the guts to admit it," Emily said. "Got it, but please visit me sometimes," her ex-mother-in-law begged as they parted. "You've been like my own daughter all these years. It's tough alone. Call." "Okay," Emily agreed. Just don't be mad at me. I'm not to blame for this." Another 2 months passed. In that time, Mark, out of the hospital, got his health back and managed to land a job at a local park near Rochester. And a month later, they had a wedding. Mark sold his house by the lake, and they chipped in to buy new housing and a car in a Rochester suburb. And in less than a year, they had a daughter. If you liked the story, I hope for your support with a thumbs up. Take care.